So I'm running for treasurer because I think there's more that the treasurer's office can do to get the state's economy back on track. And I think all of us who are running for office this year, no matter what position we're running for, that needs to be what we're focused on. How do we use that office to get the economy going, to bring jobs back to Rhode Island, because that's what we need now. And I do think there are a lot of things that we can do and we must do from that office. So I put out this plan last week, we call it the blueprint, for how I intend to use the treasurer's office to get the state's economy moving. The blueprint has 5 parts. The first part is a collection of ideas for how we increase funding of infrastructure projects, putting people back to work, fixing our roads, our bridges, our buildings. The second part is the establishment of what I call the Rhode Island Green Bank, modeled off of what a lot of other states and cities are beginning to do around the country. The third part is my plan to invest more of our taxpayer dollars locally. The Treasurer's Office oversees billions of dollars of taxpayer funds.
You mean our investments, right?
Yeah, exactly. The vast majority of which are invested out of state or even out of the country. And I do believe that we can and we should invest some more of that money here locally so that we can stimulate our own economy. The fourth part is what I call financial empowerment. This is an issue that's very close to my heart. A huge percentage of Rhode Islanders, 25% of Rhode Island households, either don't have a bank account at all, or they have a bank account but they're still relying on predatory financial services like payday loans. And I have a very robust plan for how I want to crack down on those predatory financial services, but also work with banks and community organizations to make sure that there are alternatives available so that people have someplace else to go. And then the final part, the fifth and final part of the blueprint, is my plan for how I intend to manage the state's retirement system, which of course is one of the most important jobs of the treasurer.
Okay, well, let's start with that. Is that part of what you mean when you say invest more of our assets locally?
Yeah, so I do think that we can be investing more of our state's assets locally in general, and that includes in the pension system. Now, we have about $8 billion in this pension fund. Again, the vast majority are invested out of state or out of the country, and it should be that way just
what
because...
What percentage do you know is invested locally?
Oh, very small, very small.
Right,
I mean, you're probably talking a fraction of a percent.
What percentage would you like to see?
Well, what I laid out in the blueprint is a plan to invest a portion of the state's private equity allocation in local startup companies. I think that if we started with a small amount relative to the $8 billion of the pension fund, $10, $20 million, you would still be talking a fraction of a percent of the overall pension system, but it could make a huge difference in building the knowledge economy here in Rhode Island. We've got the makings of a great startup hub here in Rhode Island. We've got great organizations like Beta Spring and the Social Enterprise Greenhouse and the Founders League. We have some local startup companies that are growing and doing great things. But we haven't quite hit that critical mass yet where it really reaches that inflection point and starts to grow on its own organically. And I do think that we can invest a little bit more here at home to do that while keeping the pension system diversified so that we spread our risk. Again, I'm talking about less than 1% of the pension system, but for the local startup community here in Rhode Island, that can make a huge difference.
It's kind of like a hedge fund, but the hedges were betting on Rhode Island rather than some financial analyst prediction or...
Yeah, I don't know that I would compare it to a hedge fund, but I do. No, but I am.
I don't blame you.
But I am betting on Rhode Island, absolutely, and that's a bet that I think will pay off because we do have tremendous talent and energy and an entrepreneurial spirit in this state. That I think is worth investing in.
Love that. So I want to talk to you about the Green Infrastructure Bank and the school construction funding part of it. Tell me what a Green Infrastructure Bank does.
Well, it can do a few different things. One part of it is making buildings more energy efficient. So basically what you can do is you can put some money into doing energy retrofits of buildings, replacing the windows, the light bulbs, maybe rooftop solar, things like that. Over time, the building owner will see savings because they're spending less on their utility bills. And some of those savings can then stay with the building owner, which puts a little more money in their pocket and helps stimulate the economy. And then some of those savings also can go back into the fund so that it revolves. It's a revolving fund.
It's a revolving
Yeah,
fund.
exactly.
Where do we get the money from?
Well, we have a small program in Rhode Island already where a small amount of money comes out of the utility bills that we pay to go into doing building retrofits. But what I want to do is take that same amount of money, not charge people more, and instead of paying directly for retrofits from those funds, if instead you put it aside and create what's called a loan loss reserve, then you can get private lenders, private capital, private banks to put money into doing even more of these retrofits and more in-depth and robust retrofits.
And why
so
would
basically, yeah, because what you're doing by putting aside this loan loss reserve, you're helping them cover their risk. So this is not the real numbers, but to keep the math simple.
Thank you.
If you were collecting $1 million a year out of this utility charge, you could just go and spend it on $1 million worth of new windows and new light bulbs for buildings, which is what we're doing now. Or you can take that million, put it aside, go to the private lenders and say, hey, if you loan $20 million to building retrofit programs, then if some of those loans go bad, we have this $1 million reserve to help you cover some of your loss. It's a multiplier effect. You're basically taking the same amount of money from the ratepayers that we already are, not adding to it, but by involving private capital and private lenders, you're multiplying the amount of retrofits you can do, and also the robustness of those retrofits, because you can pay for more expensive types of improvements.
Ooh, Seth, there's something about that really scares me, partnering with private investors. Tell me why I shouldn't be nervous about that.
Well, this kind of thing is done elsewhere. It's typical. And again, we're not promising the private investors anything. We're helping to cover some of their risk. But again, it's a way to dramatically increase the amount of money that's going toward making our state more energy efficient.
Okay. And kind of the same principle for building new schools or school infrastructure?
No, my ideas for school buildings are a little bit different. And I want to model it off of the way we do it, with the way they do it in Massachusetts. Okay. So the way this works in Rhode Island now, first of all, we have a moratorium on school construction funding from the state that has been going on for 4 years now, and it's just a disaster. The health and safety of children is not something that should be put on pause just because the economy is bad. But even before the moratorium went into effect, the way it basically worked was the municipalities were responsible for raising some funds to pay for school construction, and then they would go to the state for a match. And the problem with that is, of course, the wealthier communities have an easier time raising funds to go apply for the match. Yep. And so the school construction that was going on wasn't necessarily based on need. Right. Now, the way they do it in Massachusetts, I think, is much better. First of all, they have a devoted stream of revenue. For them, I think it's about a penny off of the sales tax. Every time you go and buy something in Massachusetts, 1 penny goes into this school construction fund. So there is no moratorium there. There's that stable stream of revenue no matter whether the economy is doing well or poorly. That, I think, is important because I do think this should be a priority regardless of the state of the economy. And then the other thing that they do there that we should do here is they have a statewide list of every school building ranked based on need, based on the condition of the building, so that when those funds are allocated, they're going to where they are most needed. And
do we have that in Rhode Island, that list of what schools need a fixing and do?
If we have it, it's not what's used to base where the funding should go, and it should be.
Yeah. So how do you get something like that? How, as treasurer, are you going to use the bully pulpit to... Yeah. In my neck of the woods, people think it was working out just fine. We have brand new schools down there.
And that wouldn't necessarily change, by the way. But I think that communities that are able to pay for upgrades, of course, can still do so. But no, in terms of how I would use the treasurer's office as a bully pulpit, you answered your own question. I mean, you get up there and you develop a plan. The treasurer does have a staff. You have some resources to put good plans and good ideas together. And then to advocate for them, to go advocate at the General Assembly, to take the argument to the public and say this is what we need to be doing. We need to be investing in becoming more energy efficient and fixing our schools. And, we can do that and put a little pressure on the legislature to make these things a priority.